I'm sure you all heard the story of the saying, the best laid plans of mice and men. Well, you're looking at one today. Because due to a series of comedy of errors, I made some crib notes today. This is a permanent record, a record of every move I made in the Royal Air Force from when I volunteered until I retired. And I was going to talk about this because I think this is as much as interesting as talking about Falcon Field for a simple reason. All of you are presumably sons, daughters, whatever, of one of two groups of people. Either the person you're thinking about was an ex-University Air Squadron student, or he was an ex-secondary modern student. Now, as an interest, how many people's father, or whatever it is that you're interested in, how many of them were University Air Squadron people? Relatively few. How many were ex-grammar school, ex-secondary modern schools? Now, we've got a problem, you see, because there was that many of us that were secondary modern. There was this number here were university scale. And we didn't know that they existed, and these didn't know that they existed. Because their training and everything they did was completely different to what we did. So you see, we got some people going through which were ex-secondary modern. Some of them were way up here, very intelligent young men, reading for a degree at the university, joined the squadron, and of course, they never came the way we came. So, how do I do it? The time we spent, that was Len and I, and couldn't know how many more, the time we spent was about that length between volunteering and getting to Eaton Park. Eaton Park, of course, was where we went when we moved to Arizona. The University Air Squadron people, we didn't know they existed until we got to Eaton Park. And we didn't even know then, until we got more or less on the way, that there was two separate groups of us. And we both got totally different backgrounds. So what do I do now? Do I talk about what happened to us? Do I talk about what happened to your University of Scotland? Or what do I do? Because I didn't know anything about what they did, and they didn't know what I did. So I always kept a crib note of where we've been in the area, and that's it. And that's my entire life. I spent a lot of time thinking a little bit more help aid a memoir of what we did there, here. And it's this that I want to talk to you, if I may, because the majority of you are interested. You couldn't be conscripted in the RAF during the war. You could only volunteer for flying. That was very simple, that the necessary work that had to be done to become an aircrew was such that if you'd been conscripted, you wouldn't have been interested in doing it anyway. So our interest started the day we volunteered. And if we sort of looked at it in batches, there's the day we volunteered until we got to Heaton Park. Then there was a Heaton Park when it was a holding unit, and all we did was keep out of mischief as much as we could. Then there was a part where we travelled to America. Then onto that was up to Falcon Field. Now, without a shadow of a doubt, the most interesting part of my life was from when I volunteered, 17 and a quarter. Just think about it, 17 and a quarter. I walked into a recruiting office and said, "I want to fly!" And the sergeant looked down at me and said, "What?" "I want to fly!" "Do you want to volunteer?" "Yeah." "Oh." "Was your mum know?" "No." "Was your dad know?" "No." "Are you going to tell them?" "No." "Don't you know with them?" "Oh, yes it has," he said. "Why?" He said, "You're not 21, are you?" So I said, "No, I'm 17 and a quarter. He's told me that before." So he said, "Don't you realise that until you're 21, your parents are legally responsible for you? And if they say they don't want you to join the RAF, you can't join. That's the end of it. Oh, so he said, come on. And in we went. And he sat me down at the table, and he pulled out a piece of paper, a white sheet of paper. It was foolscap. Now, foolscap's a little bit bigger than this. This is A4. Foolscap, A4 hadn't been invented in those days. This was foolscap. And he started to ask questions about me. If I'd been applying for M6 and MF6, he couldn't have asked me more personal questions, more detailed questions. He wanted to know every single thing about me. He wrote it all down. And I thought, well, that's getting a bit cheeky, this is. Eventually, he said, okay, now then about your parents. Parents, what have they got to do with it? They're not going to help me fly. So he said, you can't join unless your parents say you can. So that was that. But after he finished all this lot, he said to me, now, I'll follow this until you're 17 and a half. I'm 17 and a quarter. What's the 17 and a half got to do with it? He said, and then you'll be sent to an aircrew assessment unit where you'll be tested with a whole series of tests. The results of those tests, each and every one of those tests, will tell us something about you. You might not realise what we're doing, but it'll tell you, it'll tell us something about you. And then when you finish that, you'll have an interview with the senior selection committee. There was an air commodore. He's the one with the gold plate around your elbows up to there. There's a group captain. There's an air commander. I'm sorry, what was his name? Air commander. No, pardon me, my language is going a little bit. And another gentleman, which, when I got there, I called him straight away. I looked at him, I thought he was like a professor. Well, it turned out he was. Well, those four quizzed me at the end of these tests. Those tests lasted 3 days. We had to go to a special place to do it. I had to go to Solihull, to a place called Viceroy Court. And we had to stay for 3 days, so we had to take our night's accommodation and all the rest of it. And at the end of it, these four officers looked at us, and the Air Commodore, you'd have made the world's best poker player without any shadow of a doubt. You just could not, looking at him, you could not gain the slightest hint of what he was getting at. He'd ask you a question, and he'd look straight at you, and you'd no idea what he was thinking when you answered him. The group captain was on our side. He smiled occasionally, and the wing commander, that was it. The wing commander was the other one. He wasn't having us at any price. He was not having secondary and bottom kids in his air force. That was it. So they give us a good old query, and that's the rest of it. Now those tests that lasted 3 days, I don't know who devised them, but they were so varied. And the officer in charge told us, in no circumstance, he said, don't try to prejudge them. Do every test as you see it to your best of your ability. Because if you put it on one side that you want to be a pilot and that's got nothing to do with piloting, so don't do it, he said, forget it. Answer everything as you can. So, of course, we'd done these tests, and we had this interview, and I was convinced I'd failed. I knew I'd failed. There's no question at all. The first test we did was a 3-hour academic test. We had some mathematics, some English, some geography, and all the rest of it. And I couldn't answer any of those mathematical questions for love of money. I have no idea. I was secondary modern. Well, I was pre-secondary modern, I was elementary. And the word elementary was what it meant. It was as basic as you could be. But anyway, I went home quite convinced that I would hear no more. So that was February 1943. On July the 27th, I was ordered to attend Viceroy Court in Birmingham, in Solihull, Birmingham, to do this aircrew assessment tests. We're told to bring on 3 nights over accommodation, all the rest of it. As soon as we got there, we had a medical test. Now, I've never had such a medical test in my life. I swear blind, there isn't a square centimetre of my hand, my body, that they hadn't pulled, pushed, opened, did whatever. It didn't go on. It went on and on and on. And eventually, he said, okay, fair enough. And then we started these tests. And as I said, they lasted for 3 days. And they were so interesting, but you had no idea what they were getting at when they asked you questions. Some of them were mathematical, some of them were English, some of them were more academic, some of them were more practical, engineering types of things. Some of them were sort of stuff that you get when you try to apply for the Mesa sort of thing. Mrs. Roberts lives at number 6, number G is number 18, so on, so on, so on. What colour's the front door? Is that type of stuff? Well, I was sure it failed. So the next thing is early in August, I received a letter informing me that I had failed. But they would offer me a PACT course, PACT, Preliminary Aircrew Training course. It will be held at one of the polytechnics, the Royal Polytechnics, and they chose Eden Park for me. And this was a bit of a mix-up. We were to attend Salford University, as it is now, from the morning, all day. We had lunch at the university, but we started life at Eden Park, breakfast. We called the train into Manchester, marched to Salford, spent the day at Salford, marched back to Manchester back to Eden Park in time for the first sitting of early tea. But where did we sleep? I don't think we'd ever thought about that. We found ourselves all billeted around private houses, around Eden Park entrance. And I got landed with a couple that they were absolutely magnificent. 2 of us got landed there, and the other lad lived at Bolton. So every weekend he used to go home to Bolton. But of course I couldn't because I lived in Nottinghamshire. And they looked after us as though we were their daughter, their son. Well, eventually, that came to an end. On 1st of January, I think it was, they said, this course is at Worsdell, and it will be an academic course. And what we're trying to do is, they didn't say this, but that we knew it, the university were okay with their education. We were down there. And the RAF have no hold about this. It wasn't a case of that coming down here to this. It was a case of this was going to come up here. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me in my whole life. I say to this day, if I hadn't done that course, whatever life I've had would have been pitiful relative to what I have had as a result of learning that course at Salford University. It was wonderful.
Roy, can I just interrupt? I hate to interrupt you because you're in such full flow, and your memory for detail, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room must realise that this man has a memory that is absolutely astonishing. Just put your finger on where you've got to because we're coming back to you. But I just, while you've got as far as Heaton Park, before we leave the country, just wanted to bring in Len and Ted on the screen and just compare their experiences. Can I just ask you one question though, Roy? Were you in the ATC at all?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, training cadets. Did you draw them at all?
I was an ATC.
You were an ATC cadet because you were as well, weren't you, Len?
Sorry?
You were in the ATC as well.
ATC, yeah.
And can you tell us how your story started? Because wasn't it something to do with seeing a Spitfire a bit like we are today?
Well, my story was rather different to my colleague. In 1943, I worked in the precinct of Salisbury Cathedral, and there we saw I saw a Spitfire fly over, and I thought to myself, that's what I want to do, fly a Spitfire. So I joined the ATC and became a sergeant. It didn't take very long. I had to pay a few exams. And in November '93, I was called up to join the RAF. When I joined the RAF as a cadet, and we went up to London, and because my education was secondary modern, I went on a course for 6 months at Ealing Technical College, run by the RAF, and I spent that. And then I think it was in about May 1944, I went up to London again, up to Regent's Park, and I was sent on to fly to see whether or not I was able to fly. And to do that, I had to fly Tiger Moths at the polo ground at Windsor. And where they now play polo. All I can remember about that is that there was some royalty over from the Netherlands who came over to escape the Nazis. So I soloed my pilot, my Tiger Moth in front of royalty. There can't be many people who've done that. So, I finished that. I passed. I got the original one here, and I soloed. That's the original one.
Pilots flying well. So that's for your. That's for the Tiger Moth.
You would test whether or not, before they started, whether or not you were able to fly. Well, that did prove that I had some idea, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I did what I was told. And I passed this. They sent me up to London, up to Regent's Park, and there I did a little bit of training, and then we were sent to somewhere in the south coast.
Stormy Down?
Stormy Island.
No, not Stormy Down. I ended at Stormy Down.
Torquay?
Torquay, in Torquay area.
That was cool.
And there I did 2 days of tests, as my friend here did. So the colour tests, educational tests, testing photographs and maps, and you had to identify which part of the map your photograph took, etc., etc. Eventually, after I came out as a trainee pilot come bombing, from there I joined, I went to Stormy Down to an EFTS. From there, I somewhere else, and eventually ended up in Bridgenorth and did my flying training and I think number 5 EFTS at Bridgenorth. And then from there, we went to Hayden Park, and it was Hayden Park. We met lots and lots of people. We went to various aerodromes doing various things. One of which I probably told you that they put me in charge of some Italian prisoners of war. They gave me a gun with no bullets. We did that sort of thing. I also did bombed up aircraft for the RAF. And I remember that at that time it was so cold, they used to have a toss of rum. Well, first of all, I said, no, I don't drink. But the second time, I must admit, I did drink. It's very, very cold. And I can't remember what they must have done daylight bombing. And this was in the middle of the night. Anyway, I went to Stormy Down, and the group of us went up to Scotland, and eventually on Aquitania, we went with a shipload of injured Americans and with us. And we went to America, and from America to New York, up to Canada, and then down to Mesa. So
Okay.
that was my introduction. At no time did I do any tests other than the educational course for 6 months. I did the flying training course in my Tiger Moss, and I then went to the assessment I had at Torquay. There's no time did I do any interviewing. I was just there's a lot I can remember. That's my story.
Thank you, Len. That's
There's one very interesting fact here. You've heard Len's story about how he went in. You've heard my story. We were totally different in our approach and everything, yet we were all trained to be pilots. The RAF treated us totally different. Len went to one school to do his flying grading. I went to one about 5 miles away at Wingfield, which was just close to Windsor, Broadley, who were stationed in the border. And I had a pilot who was on, he'd done a tour of duty, and he was on recreation, I suppose, and he was my instructor in the Tiger Moth. Now, Len and I then, our pilots went all over the place, and yet we were both all training for the same thing, and it was all almost incredible because it didn't seem as though we were dealing with the same people, but we were.
It's fascinating, that, isn't it? That's why it's so useful to hear you both telling your stories.